We are now live.
Good morning, everyone. Just want to be sure you can hear me.
Rob, we can begin. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our virtual board meeting. Unfortunately, we continue to hold virtual board meetings, but hopefully soon we'll see good progress on the pandemic and put that behind us and go back to meeting in person. There's a few housekeeping items to keep in mind. We are streaming the public portion of this meeting live on our YouTube channel. If we happen to experience any technical difficulties with the live stream, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube. To those who are in attendance, your microphone has been muted, and I ask that you put your hand up if you'd like to speak, and we will retain a list of speaking requests as we go. Once you are called upon to speak, you can unmute yourself and proceed. We ask that you please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. And as it relates to voting, please raise a hand to indicate your vote when the vote is called. Should you be disconnected from the video call, please rejoin using the link previously provided. Okay, we will begin today with Section 10, Caledon OPP meeting. Welcome, Inspector Garrett. We will now refer to the OPP Caledon agenda. We'll do a roll call. I think everyone from the board is here, and I think we're good. Are there any declarations of conflict? Okay, seeing none, we can move forward. The first item will be the approval of the minutes from the meeting held Friday, February 26, 2021. Can I have a mover? Mayor Crombie, seconded by Mr. Bowden. All in favor? Okay, so that has been carried. The second item is Caledon OPP first quarter report. Inspector Garrett, please, if you may present the report to us.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
sir,
we can.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Actually, Inspector, it seems you're cutting out.
So first quarter report on public complaints. We have next page, motor vehicle collisions by type. We're
Inspector, your voice is cutting out.
In personal injury. Overall for the first quarter of 2021, we're down 24.8%. Code of provincial statute down first quarter of 2021, we only had 9.
Rob, is there a way we can
So we're
Communicate.
down significantly. And is that not going through very well?
Yeah, Inspector, we can't hear you well. Maybe if you turn off your video.
Sorry, violent crime, just to get. Turn off. Okay, better now.
Not too much better, Inspector.
Okay, 7. Not too much better.
Through the chair,
On
perhaps
to property crime.
Director can call in on audio only. He could provide the update. That might be an option.
Absolutely. Inspector, can you do that? The call and details should be in the calendar invite.
Okay, stand by. I can call in. I just have to
We'll give you a minute. Don't worry.
Actually,
find the number.
through you,
I don't have the
Chair.
number handy.
through you, Chair, I think it's
Okay,
better
thank you.
now if we continue.
Inspector, do you want to give it another go?
Are you?
No, Inspector, I think you need to call in, please.
Just
Rob, if you
That
can
number?
Rob, can you email the inspector call and details,
Sir?
please?
and I'll
Yeah, you'll get
Call in.
you'll get an email momentarily.
calling in right now.
Sorry, Inspector, I can't understand what you're saying.
Welcome to Zoom. Password.
Chair, through you, we've muted his mic only because we can't seem to hear it. Can I suggest that we move to the board agenda now, and if we can sort out the connection with the inspector, move the section 10 board meeting to the end of the public board meeting?
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Oh,
Can you hear me now?
we can. You may want to hang up your other connection.
I've called in now.
We can hear you, Inspector. There is an echo though. Yes, perfect. Please continue.
Okay, is that better now, sir?
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay, perfect. There we go. So
You may,
I'll just
want to
repeat,
start
I'll go
over.
back.
Yeah.
I'll start right over. Yes, sir. Okay, so quarter one, 2021, the Caledon OPP received 0 public complaints. Motor vehicle collisions overall were down 24.8%. Criminal code and provincial statute charges laid overall were down charges 13.6%. Most notable in criminal code traffic were down 74%. That's due to a decrease in the amount of impaired drivers that we've charged during the first quarter. Moving on to violent crime. Violent crime for first quarter, Caledon OPP, overall we're down 4.7% from this time last year. Property crime, for first quarter compared to last year, we're up 11%. Notably, our theft overs are up 83%. That was due to a chop shop operation takedown at the beginning of this year in Caledon. And our drug crimes were up this first quarter of 2021 by 16.7%. And our clearance rates are down 5.7%. Notably, property crimes, we've seen a big increase in the first quarter in theft of gas and theft of liquor at gas stations by utilizing stolen vehicles and stolen plates, hence the lower clearance rate. So that is skimming through quarter one of 2021. Does anybody have any questions for Caledon OPP?
Mr. Bowden.
Not really a question, Inspector, and through you, Mr. Chair, Inspector Glenn, could you take just a moment to talk about the initiative that you're taking on the truck inspections in Caledon and cooperating with the other police forces in our area and what we discussed at our meeting, just so for the good of the group, please?
Absolutely, sir. As usual, Caledon takes very seriously commercial motor vehicle enforcement. What we're planning is we have a joint forces operation that we're hosting in Caledon on the June 10th and June 11th. We have a total of 20 commercial motor vehicle inspectors from our surrounding agencies, including Peel, Halton, Waterloo, York Region, MTO, and others. And we plan on blitzing commercial motor vehicles in the town of Caledon on those particular 2 days, the June 10 and June 11. With the numbers that we're bringing in to this blitz, I do anticipate very good results and also removing any vehicles that are unsafe for the roadways.
Thank you, Inspector. Any other comments? Mayor Crombie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you're using the raised hand feature. I finally found it and was able to raise my hand. So don't know if we're going to do that or just wave at you.
Just
thank
wave.
you, Inspector, for the data. I just wonder if you want to comment on, some of the more violent crimes are down, and notwithstanding it was COVID year and people were home. What do you attribute to some of the changes?
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. Really just for violent crime is public education. We've been doing a lot of online education through our community service officer, and basically just keeping people engaged with the police, even though we don't have a lot of face-to-face time as we did prior to COVID. But yes, we do have a lot more people at home, but we are still seeing a lot of traffic through Caledon. People commuting through Caledon to get to the greater Toronto area. So it's just switching from virtual public education to from the police as far as public safety messaging, and what programs are available to our residents.
Thank you. I would suggest as well that Caledon's a beautiful place, and many of us have taken the opportunity to come up and go hiking and enjoy the nature. And that's why you're seeing the car traffic, particularly on the weekends. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's a little mixed bag. There are some increases, some decreases, but I was delighted to see that overall. I thought there was a decrease over last year, and that's very good news. You know, it was funny, we had talked about this in our statistics as well with PRP, and some of the domestic violence had gone down, which I thought would not be the case. It would be quite the reverse, in fact, given that there's a lot of stress and people are home often with their abusers. I wondered if it was a case of crimes not being reported rather than not being committed.
Well, there's always that chance of reality that some crimes are not being reported. Another indicator is our mental health apprehensions, and mental health related calls in general are also down about 17% from this time last year, which I was actually a little bit surprised due to COVID, but actual numbers are down.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments? With that, can I have a mover to receive the report? Mayor Crombie, seconded by Mr. Bowden. All in favor? So the report has been carried. This concludes the Section 10 Caledon OPP agenda. Thank you, Inspector Garrett, for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, sir, and sorry about the technical difficulties.
No problem. We'll now move to the public board meeting of May 28th, 2021. Begin with the roll call. I think everyone is still here. And are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, we'll continue with the meeting. The next item on the agenda is the Chief's update. I will now ask the Chief to provide the board with this update.
Thank you, Chair Tia, and good morning to the board members. I do have several updates that I'll work through. Before I know we have some significant presentations this morning, so looking forward to that. The first is, as the board would know, is that we have just recently completed several senior officer promotions, which about 15 senior officers at the rank of superintendent and inspector, some immediately promoted, some to be promoted upon vacancy. And it's just another significant milestone in the growth of this organization. We've also had several retirements of some lifelong contributing members of PRP. So with that comes new faces and new changes, and we're excited to see them. They will add to the diversity among our ranks and skill sets and composition. We do anticipate that in the fall, we will have another round of staff sergeant and sergeant promotions, which will be obviously a greater number and a good thing for the service as well. One thing I did want to note, which Mayor Crombie, Chair Yanika, and of course Mayor Brown separately would know, is that this afternoon there will be a Greater GTHA Safety Summit, which is being hosted by Mayor Tory and Chief Raymer. And it is subsequent to a January 2020 summit in which the chiefs and the mayors and the regional chairs have met to discuss across the GTA some of the common themes as it pertains to the gun and gang violence that we know has no borders. And some of the discussions have also been as it relates to a small percentage of high risk violent offenders that continually repeat. We have seen that here locally in Peel. We know that is the same case in the other municipalities. But it also is an opportunity to dialogue with common points of interest with provincial and federal government, as well as discuss how we are handling the prevalence of firearms that enter our community that are crime guns. For us, one of the big narratives is 88% last year of the illegal handguns that we seized in Peel region originate from the US. And that's a significant number that requires some thought and collaboration. So we're looking forward to this conversation this afternoon, but I wanted to let the board know that we would continue to discuss our approach here in Peel along with our policing partners. With that, I want to just, we know last board meeting, we had an opportunity to present with you the launch of our Intimate Partner Violence Unit. And as a quick verbal update from Deputy Milinovich, if you could do that, it's one of our largest initiatives this organization has taken on. But Nick, can I ask you to comment quickly?
Absolutely. Any opportunity I have a chance to comment on this, I'm happy to do that, Chief. And through the chair, I'm excited to announce that we have just completed our first month of a movement, really. You would be familiar with the presentation we gave last month. You saw that we really engaged in a comprehensive overhaul of the way that we engage in this space. Family and intimate partner violence, roughly responsible for about 40% of our homicides. And, like I've said, we're not just talking about the survivors, we're talking about the rippling impacts that are carried throughout the communities that are affected. So an absolutely critical piece of our community safety and well-being plan. A month ago, our service was successful in moving to a family justice center model, making us one of the largest services in Canada to incorporate and adopt that model. I'm incredibly proud of it. And one of the key or the foundational pieces to success for us was to begin to lessen the involvement of uniformed police personnel in instances of intimate partner violence. And, I'll commit to a more comprehensive overview of some of the key performance indicators and some of the metrics that we've established in order to measure whether or not we're achieving some of the ultimate results and outcomes that we're looking for. But I'm happy to report that of all of the instances of criminal intimate partner violence, we have been able to utilize our IPV unit in 98% of those cases. So out of 720 intimate partner violence occurrences, roughly 32% of them constituted a criminal offense, or the investigation was supported and we believe the criminal offense occurred. Of that 32%, 98% were then taken over and moved over to our embedded model, which is huge for us. One of the aims is to provide a more culturally appropriate and inclusive opportunity for survivors to come forward and report to police. And Mayor Crombie, you'd mentioned, the question around, are less occurrences being reported? We certainly hear from our service providers that there's a number of factors inclusive of the pandemic that are creating barriers for survivors to come forward and report. And, we feel this is a really strong effort on behalf of the police service to make it more comfortable and to reduce some of those barriers in a way that supports survivors and prevents the violence that we have seen. So thank you for the opportunity to provide that update.
Thanks, Nick. And just to conclude, I also wanted to comment that we do have a deputation that is further on in the agenda. I just wanted to add some context to that particular deputation, which pertains to a private member's bill that is being presented, that is before cabinet by Deepak Anand. It pertains to a bill to encourage prepaid payments at gas pumps. We know that it may not sound like the most significant discussion point, but it does represent a significant health risk to attendants that work at convenience stores. We have had a local incident over the last several years in the GTA and locally where we've lost a gas bar attendant to gas and dash, as they call it, where there's a theft of gas, really. There, as of several weeks ago, one in Woodstock. The Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police have endorsed this bill. It is one which, of course, with other priorities at Queen's Park is still in the process, but it is one that, I want to just personally speak to, impacts our officers. In the last 5 years, we've probably gone to 21,000 gas and dash drive-offs, and in 2018, I think we were at our peak with 4,000 a year. If you can equate that to a theft in which it's completely preventable by just prepaid by a card or by cash, would also, you're thinking about the amount of hours officers spend responding, whether they be on the phone or otherwise, to something that's easily preventable. The bigger narrative, though, is that it provides to the Ontario Association of Convenience Store Workers a greater safety. That association has also endorsed that. So I think, the deputation just requires a little bit of context before you see that. And finally, I just wanted to say that you'll see many of our senior leaders and our officers wearing green epaulettes. This represents the conclusion of Mental Health Awareness Month. For us, this initiative has been driven by Peel Beyond the Blue, which is a peer-led, not-for-profit organization, which our organization, Peel Police, the Peel Regional Police Association, President Woolley, and our Senior Officers Association endorse. They have a chapter in Toronto as well. And this month, we've been really encouraging the discussion in our environment to take away the stigma to discuss mental health and your mental illness, and being able to discuss with peers or those that can support you. So, we have to acknowledge that just in the last week, Chief Williams from London Police lost one of his members to mental health illness and taking his life. We know the OPP has endured a significant amount last year, in such that the province and the Solicitor General has invested a significant amount of resourcing into the OPP to support their own members' health and wellness. We want to thank the board for their continued support and in our programming for mental health and organizational wellness. We know the board has authorized our establishment of an offsite organizational wellness office, but this is an issue obviously that affects all first responders, and from a continuum of health, from responding to it in injury right to illness. So with that, I'll turn it back to Chair. Thank you for indulging us with some verbal updates.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions or announcements from board members? Okay, I don't see anyone. And so we'll go to our first item on the agenda. Oh, Mayor Crombie.
Because we're in public session, I should raise this because I did in the in-camera, and it's not on the agenda, but, more and more we're seeing protests in our squares, and for very legitimate reasons, but obviously we have a stay-home lockdown order, and I thought I'd give the chief an opportunity to explain why it's difficult to manage these large groups, which do have a constitutional right to gather and assemble and protest, notwithstanding we've been all told to stay home and not meet with our extended families. And I think that's very difficult for people. And I wondered if you just wanted to speak to, the control that we have, the ability or the whatever tactics we have to ensure that this is at a minimum being done safely, and do we charge anyone for violating any of the emergency measures rules, or just from your perspective, because certainly I think there's a lot of frustration that people are following the rules, yet there are people who gather legitimately, and I think there's not an understanding that these kinds of protests can be legitimate and are their legal right, but yet obviously frowned on during this time of an epidemic and pandemic. Chief, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. And, I think, first of all, I acknowledge that if we've had a year where, the dichotomy of protect yourself, stay home, restrict movement, but with, a multitude of, really compelling issues that various segments of our community that are geopolitical, international, and then some issue-based protests that are more local, is really in the face of the push-pull of what's doable during this time. So we know it, we see it in our community. I think as it pertains to the role of Peel Regional Police and my colleagues across Ontario in policing, is that we have this role the paramount role is to protect the safety and security of the members of the public, and also to balance the ability of those to gather, to protest in a constitutional way, and how the dichotomy between gatherings and restrictions is one which we have endeavored to take on in a very balanced and fair way, where we recognize the ability for peaceful protests in large numbers. In many cases, we've had 15 to 20,000 here in our region in the last couple of weeks. And from a practical standpoint, what is appropriate for policing to do as it pertains to provincial lockdown and standards and regulations from an enforcement standpoint, and what's impractical, what also can aggravate a peaceful protest, which is also unnecessary to do too. What I can say is that our primary efforts is to make sure that where there are protests and there's an ability for us to contact organizers and to facilitate that it occur in a way that's peaceful and meaningful, but also to acknowledge the fact that there's a responsibility on those who have a coordination under law. And so we've been doing that where appropriate, where there are, say, egregious acts that will compromise the safety of the public or others. We will take action, but where we can facilitate a peaceful protest, we will continue to do that. But I have to say that we have consistently taken action with where there have been organizers and they have received offense notifications as it pertains to the EMCPA, the Emergency Municipal Civil Protection Act, as well as the Recovery Act of Ontario where appropriate. And sometimes that happens in the days pursuant to the large event where we can identify and communicate with them. So this is our consistent approach, whether it be a small gathering, whether it be an international issue, right down to some of the more localized issues that we're seeing. I'd invite Deputy Andrews and Milinovich, who have a joint responsibility for managing it, to top that up if I've missed anything, Mark or Nick.
Chief, through the chair, I think you've done a terrific job of explaining it. It's a complex issue that is difficult to handle and manage while balancing those two really competing interests. And what I can say is 2020 was a year where we saw that become an increasing pressure for our community and our service. And we've built into it a really comprehensive plan that I think is considerate of the need to balance those two interests. And I believe that the outcomes that we've seen most recently, where we've had these large protests that thankfully didn't evolve into real public safety and community safety issues outside of obviously the COVID piece, and we're well managed is a reflection of that, and the community's willingness to work with us in building some organization around that.
Nick, you both hit on all the key points. I just like to reinforce the concept, though, that working with the community, and we've built out a really robust internal process. But at the same time, we've built out a really robust relationship and a network within the community to ensure that we have those contacts and we make those contacts prior to the events, and that's put us in good stead to be able to handle everything from the relatively small, innocuous, less impactful events all the way up to 15, 20,000 people in a major public setting.
If I may just finish up that, notwithstanding many of the causes are very legitimate and near and dear to people's hearts, you can understand that other residents are very frustrated when they're asked not to leave their homes and not to see their extended families, but yet large, often very large groups come out and gather or protest. And notwithstanding, I know some of the causes are very important. We just question whether this is the time or, and of course the onus is on the Peel Regional Police or the security and bylaw enforcement of the cities. to manage both issues. You know, the rights to assemble versus what measures may have been breached as a result of the Stay Home and the Emergency Measures Act and the Reopening of Ontario Act.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll move on in the agenda. The first item of our agenda is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on Friday, April 23rd, 2021. Everyone has a copy of these. Can I have a mover to approve the minutes? Mr. Chada, and a seconder, Mr. Howell, and all in favor? It's been carried. Thank you. We now have a deputation. This deputation today is a written submission from Mr. Deepak Anand, MPP from Mississauga Malton. He is advocating through this Bill 231 titled Protecting Ontarians by Enhancing Gas Station Safety to Prevent Gas Station Safety and Dash Act 2020. It calls for a mandatory system of fuel repayment to enhance safety and prevent gas station theft. The deputation was included in the agenda today. Are there any comments regarding the deputation? I know the chief has already made some, so thank you for that. But from the board, does anyone like to comment? Okay, I'll just say that, you know, as a board, we'll continue to support any legislation that is in the public benefit of the residents of PL. So thank you, Deepak Anand, for taking leadership on this. Can I have a mover for this deputation? Chair Ianika, a seconder, Councillor Martin Medeiros. All in favor? This has been carried. Thank you, MPP Anand, for your deputation. We will now move into presentations. The first presentation for today is a very important one. It is the PRP Human Rights Project Overview. This presentation will be given by Deputy Chief Anthony Duarte, Innovation and Technology Command and Executive Sponsor for the Human Rights Project, providing the board with an overview of the project undertaken by PRP and the board, with the support from OHRC, Ontario Human Rights Commission, to develop and implement recommendations founded upon OHRC's 7 principles for eliminating systemic racism in law enforcement. The OHRC is also present with us today for this overview. Before I pass it to the Deputy Chief, on behalf of the board, I'd like to make some introductory remarks. Just to remind the public, taking us back into the past a little bit, in October 2020, the Peel Police Services Board signed this groundbreaking MOU with the Ontario Human Rights Commission and Peel Police Services, which is centered around remedies that aim to end systemic racism and discrimination policing, but also promote transparency and enhance public trust throughout Peel region. The MOU is available for those from the public who are listening. The MOU is available on the Peel Police Services Board website under the section called Reports and Presentations. And the board acknowledges the importance of dealing with systemic racism and anti-Black racial profiling. And we fully support the MOU and the overall initiative, and we're actively involved in its implementation. This is one of many initiatives the board is supporting to ensure Peel Police becomes the most progressive police service in Canada. And I want to reinforce that the board believes in and fully supports the work of our members. Our board is committed to ensure the resources necessary to provide the best training, the best police operations, and the best equipment and technology possible for our police service. Throughout this project, another important stakeholder, our community, are engaged and will inform its outcomes as it continues this year by direct engagement of community leaders in the Anti-Racism and Human Rights Committee that's been established. Finally, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank Inspector Joy Edwards, who is the Human Rights Project lead. She's been working tirelessly on this project. We're very proud of the team at Peel Police and the OHRC for working together on this to move it along efficiently. And so thank you to all of you for your efforts, and those in the community who are engaged in giving a lot of time to serve on the committee that's informing this project. With that, I will pass it to, maybe I'll pass it to you, Chief, and then you can take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the opening comments. And I too will preface the presentation with some comments from myself. And Anthony is here. Of course, he can speak to it. I think after I'm done, I will have Chief Commissioner Chada has some opening remarks too before we proceed to the presentation. So, first of all, I want to say that this presentation to the board as an update on our progress and the work thus far is a critical one, in such that we understand that it impacts so many, and we've got a significant amount of stakeholders here. I've spoken to the board several times in board meetings regarding it, and subsequent to last October's announcement. I think it's important for me to also acknowledge that a couple of pieces before we move into talking about this work and significance of the work is that across this world, I just think I need to say that Canadian officers and civilians are equipped, supported, and trained and governed inclusive of oversight at a standard which makes them, in my opinion, the best policing model and the best individuals in policing globally. And I want to say that this organization has 3,200 of the best in this nation, if not greater. And so, starting with that, there's this great acknowledgement that systems have an opportunity to always get better. And as police leaders, and organizations, we need to go beyond verbal affirmations, and understanding that the willingness to step out and implement changes, without fear of failure, is required and expected. And I believe, you as a board have asked me to continue to do that and brought me here to do that. So as such, we've got, we're commitment from PRP to shift, which is much needed as we evolve from a traditional law enforcement model to, a pro-public health emphasis that's rooted in a human rights focus, and adopting and implementing and following principles under a systemic change framework. I want to acknowledge the systems level changes that are required across my sector in policing, as well as other human services, is much needed. But this whole discussion of change and moving forward is a critical one. I think you've heard me say it before, and it's probably been an overused quote from me about, if we don't like change, and then we're not going to like being irrelevant. I just want to unpack that, is that this organization is undertaking many initiatives with the change, and change is required. And I also understand, under the concept of change management, that there will always be, strong support, but there will also always be criticism. And I just need to, point out that, the criticism we get from embarking on making meaningful change versus the change of just staying stagnant is one which we, I as a chief will not, just dwell on. And we are doing it on the foundation of like great and good people here. But we also recognize there's an opportunity to do better and to make some systems changes that have affected people in a disproportionate way. And so the next transition is just to walk back a little, is that in September of 2019, the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police committed to the 7 principles outlined in the OHRC's policy. And they acknowledge that the recommendations are far-reaching, but that Ontario Police Services, as a act of depend on public trust and confidence to effectively serve their communities. So, Chief Paul Pedersen of Greater Sudbury acknowledged that. And, that was in September of 2019. And then that led to conversations with myself and the then Chief Commissioner in February of 2020 about what it would look like to embark on, these recommendations, providing guidance to our police sector and our organizations. And so what we found here in this year is a significant project, which we are not doing performatively to check a box, but requires some real heavy lifting and heavy discussions. And it's in a space which the Chief Commissioner will speak to is uncharted, but it's systems level work with academia that is community informed and not police led and informed. And it has to be identified that we in behind the scenes have to do some heavy lifting on behalf of my sector, which is not charted yet. And, I need to say, not speaking on behalf of other police chiefs and colleagues, but the work we're doing is not necessarily all about, PRP, but making shifts and advancements across policing. And I think the work that we're doing here is intended to have, some templating that's done for other police leaders should they choose and their boards choose to also endorse it. And this is what I mean as this is a significant role across our sector as a whole. So with that, I think, I want to first acknowledge, Chief Commissioner Ina Chadha and Raj Dheer, the Executive Director and Chief Legal Counsel for the OHRC, for their time. We have many of their members that are watching this. They couldn't all be on the Brady Bunch, head count here, but this is, they have interests too that are important for the stakeholders that they're engaging. And so, but with that, I want to first say that we have recently promoted Joy Edwards to the rank of inspector. So congratulations to Joy. She's one of those 15 that are part of this organization. She reports right to Deputy Chief Anthony O'Duarty, who's the executive sponsor on this project. But behind the scenes is a really, really big team behind PRP. And so with that, I'll pass it on to the Chief Commissioner for her comments before Joy takes over.
Thank you, Chief Duriapa, and good morning, everyone. Chair Atia, hello, and respected members of the board, and in particular, a warm set of greetings for my neighbors and Peel community members. I do have some prepared remarks, and I hope you'll indulge me. I want to let you know that almost 25 years ago, the Supreme Court of Canada said that racism is buried in the human psyche, that it's rooted in unconscious bias, and it cannot be easily identified and set aside, even if one wishes to do so. The court recognized that all social institutions, including the criminal justice system, reflect and perpetuate negative racial stereotypes. Fast forward 2 decades and several important judgments calling out systemic racism. In 2019, the Supreme Court of Canada in R versus Lee cited the Ontario Human Rights Commission's report called A Collective Impact. The court stated that the OHRC's work reveals that racial discrimination contributes to a community's feelings of fear, trauma, humiliation, lack of trust, and expectations of negative police treatment. As such, we must recognize that historical distrust of police by racialized communities is rooted in real harm and trauma. And this is the crucial backdrop to our work. I join you today to present the plan that the Ontario Human Rights Commission and Peel Regional Police will use as the roadmap to develop and implement legally binding remedies to identify and target systemic racism and discrimination in policing here in Peel Region. I believe that we all can acknowledge that the time for organizational change is now. This meeting is an important part of this change process. Addressing systemic racism requires hard work, and it takes time, and there's no question about that. Recently, in Barack Obama's tribute marking 1 year after George Floyd's murder, Obama noted that when injustice runs deep, progress takes time. But if we can turn words into action, and action into meaningful reform, we will cease fleeing from reality and begin to change it. Peel Police have signaled that they are willing to do that meaningful work to face that reality of systemic discrimination through our Memorandum of Understanding. Up until now, few, if any, police services in Canada have done this. Peel Police have expressed a willingness to tackle structural barriers, implement accountability and monitoring mechanisms, examine the role of policing in addressing community calls for de-escalation and defunding. And most importantly, they've agreed to adopt legally binding remedies to end systemic racism in policing. Because Peel Police are willing, the OHRC is also willing to collaborate with Chief Duriapa, the service, and the board to provide our human rights expertise and our guidance to support the necessary work to bring about organizational change that I believe will help dismantle systemic racism. By signing our Memorandum of Understanding last October, Peel Police and the OHRC have entered into an agreement where we will collectively, with community, create a roadmap on how to go forward with concrete actions to remedy long-standing racial disparities. Peel Police have already undertaken critical steps, from engaging respected experts in race-based data collection, anti-racism and de-escalation training, to working with the newly formed Anti-Racism Human Rights Committee. This project plan reflects our mutual goals and outlines the next milestones we must take to achieve legally binding commitments. But most importantly, these binding commitments will not be finalized unless we reflect the experiences and the issues of communities affected by policing in Peel, particularly Black, racialized, and Indigenous peoples. This past year has shone light on how Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities have borne the injustice and the tragedy of systemic racism. That's why the critical next step is to put in plan an robust engagement plan that builds on long-term, ongoing connections with and communication channels for affected communities to make sure that police services respect human rights, safety, and dignity of everyone in Peel. We know that before binding remedies are created, Peel Police and the board will have to consult much more deeply with community. I have said to Chief Duriapa that robust engagement, extensive engagement, will ultimately derive our end results, because we carry forward this heavy work on behalf of all of our respective communities. This project and the vision it presents are both exhilarating and daunting. As a proud and lifelong resident of Peel, I say to you, I mean that, 50+ years I've lived in Peel. I understand that there are communities here who have legitimate and serious grievances. I understand that many families are grieving and believe their relationship with Peel Police is irreparably harmed. The cycle of trauma must end so that future generations do not have to keep enduring this pain. I know our communities will be watching and holding us to account as we plan these exacting steps towards lasting human rights solutions. But I also know, and you know, that this is the time. We have the combined desire, the combined willingness and stamina, and the combined knowledge to change the narrative of policing in Peel. The OHRC is committed to doing whatever we can to make this happen. The OHRC will be unyielding in our efforts to seek real systemic change and for human rights to prevail. And for that, I say thank you, merci, miigwech, dhanyavad, and shukriya.
Thank you, Chief Commissioner, and we appreciate your comments. And I think now we can hand it over to Anthony to, do you want to say something, or is it to Inspector Edwards?
I think we can, Chief, get right into the presentation. I do want to acknowledge the team here today, the amount of dedication and work that both yourself and Chief Commissioner Chada has recognized on the parts of all parties to contribute to where we are today. I also want to recognize Mr. Deere here from the OHRC, who has worked extensively with me pretty much every single day to ensure that we are on target and on scope, and ensure that we are collaborative and thoughtful about this very impactful project, not just for policing, but for our entire community. With that, I want to turn it over to Joy, Inspector Joy Edwards, and I know she has a presentation ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Good morning to the chair and the board and everyone participating. I just want to start by saying that I'm very passionate about this work we're embarking on. So I appreciate this opportunity to present to you this morning on behalf of our entire team. I do have a slide presentation, so I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see that? That is good. Okay, awesome. So I'm just going to get started with the first slide. It provides an overview of the topics that will be covered. We'll start with our executive summary, a little background on the project. I know it's been covered a little bit, and then we'll go over a summary of the OHRC's 7 principles and the project itself, our status, goals and objectives, and how we align to our strategic initiatives. And then we'll finish off with our timeline. Now, the Human Rights Project is a tri-party undertaking. It's Peel Police and Peel Police Services Board working with the Ontario Human Rights Commission to implement recommendations on new and ongoing initiatives to not only identify, but eliminate systemic racism in service delivery. Now, the recommendations are founded upon the 7 principles listed on the right and are identified in the OHRC's policy on eliminating racial profiling in law enforcement. And it should be noted that the principles are endorsed by the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police. So when the chief got sworn in October 2019, he made a commitment to be accountable for both the service and the community. Our mandate is to evolve the service to a world-class organization and in due course, excel in service excellence for a safe community within Peel Region with trust in the Peel Regional Police Service. And I know we have a lot of work to do there and we're working towards that, but we all have to start somewhere. Now, from spring to fall last year, Peel Police on the Ontario Human Rights Commission engaged in discussions to establish a process and framework to address systemic racism in policing. The focus of the discussion was the development of legally binding recommendations to end systemic racism and discrimination in policing, promoting transparency and accountability, and enhancing Black, other racialized, and Indigenous communities' trust in policing throughout the region. October 14, 2020, I know the chief and the chief commissioner and the chair spoke about this, but we entered into a memorandum of understanding with the OHRC to deliver initiatives aimed at identifying and eliminating systemic racism in its delivery of services. And I could say that I, along with many of our members, are proud of our service for moving in this direction. And we're getting calls from other services interested to show how we're going to present, to show how we're going to go about this. So we're very excited about that portion as well. Now, a little bit about the Memorandum of Understanding. In accordance to the MOU, the OHRC will provide human rights guidance to our service and Police Services Board that will help identify and eliminate systemic racism in our service delivery and employment practices. This MOU also includes our commitment to develop and implement legally binding recommendations, as well as a commitment for the parties involved to engage with the Black, other racialized, and Indigenous communities in the region of Peel to learn from their experiences before finalizing the legally binding agreement. And the key part with that is that we want to make sure that we hear from the community before any of the recommendations are finalized. Now, the OHRC is working with Peel Police and Peel Police Services Board to develop potential areas for draft recommendations derived from the 7 key principles that I'll get into in a couple more slides, which will form the foundation of an agreement. This is contingent on best practices, research, successful evidence-based strategies policy and litigation experience focused on addressing systemic racism in policing. So once the OHRC, Peel Police, and the Police Services Board are in agreement on the scope and content of the recommendations, they will present the agreement to the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario, who will then set out the legally binding terms and conditions. The agreement will identify meaningful organizational changes to address systemic racism in policing. And it should be of note that the HRTO will have jurisdiction over the final agreement. Now, this next slide is our summary of the 7 principles that I mentioned in one of the first slides. As you can see, the first portion is acknowledgement to publicly acknowledge the reality of racial profiling and its impact on trust. And next is the engagement piece. This is a big portion. Under the principle of engagement, a crucial objective entails the creation of an anti-racism advisory committee for the Peel Regional Police Services Board, composed of anti-racism experts and people with lived experiences who reflect diverse viewpoints on the role of police. And this anti-racism advisory committee has been formed. And we have met so far twice this year with a mandate, and that mandate is for the committee to advise on the implementation of the agreed upon recommendations when they're completed, and to review the recommendations to ensure they represent organizational changes needed for both the internal network and the community by identifying any gaps and barriers. We have our policy guidance. We're going to align our policies and procedures with OHRC's policy on eliminating racial profiling in law enforcement. For the data collection piece, we're going to work with an independent expert to create a policy on human rights-based data collection that ensures protection of privacy, involvement of affected communities. We've hired Dr. Lauren Foster and Dr. Les Jacobs, and we'll be engaging the community in sessions as well. We're just getting started with that portion. We're going to collect and publicly release human rights-based data on the full range of police-civilian interactions, including stops and use of force. There's a monitoring and accountability piece. We're going to establish early warning capabilities with accountability at the Chiefs and Peel Police Services Board level. Organizational change is a big portion. We're establishing organizational change throughout our training, our culture, and our hiring practices. And lastly is to establish our multi-year action plan and make sure that we have clear targets. This next slide just shows the status of our project and what we've accomplished so far and what is upcoming. We have in progress that we commenced our meetings with the OHRC in July of 2020, and this is ongoing as we have not yet finalized our recommendations. So to date, as you know, we had our kickoff and signed our MOU in October of 2020. We received our draft recommendations in November, and we drafted our charter. We've created a draft for a timeline, established a project team. We've terminated our SRO program. We've onboarded our race-based data collection experts, which I just mentioned, and we have an anti-racism crisis intervention and de-escalation training expert on board as well that will assist us in boosting our training. We also have a psychologist that specializes in children in crisis. So we have the anti-racism expert and the child psychologist that will assist us in making sure that we're going in the right direction where it pertains to our training. We've engaged our association and continue to engage our PRP association as well. And upcoming is today's meeting, where after today, we're going to try and establish our scope with timelines. We're going to make sure that we prioritize. We're going to start our community consultations and survey. We're in the discovery phase for community engagement. We're going to build our multi-year action plan. We're going to train our officers and deploy more body-worn cameras and have our data collection pilot phase and our integrated project plan. Now, on this slide, it shows our project goals and objectives. And number one is to establish what is deliverable with the OHRC and establish solutions to align with OHRC's recommendations, which is a continuous improvement. And we're going to monitor the success of policies, practices, and remedies implemented for eliminating systemic racism throughout the established benchmarks. And number four, we're going to build a solid foundation for change through enhanced policies, procedures, and accountability measures, and monitoring and reporting, and continuous community engagement. And I just want to put emphasis on number five, which is the continuous community engagement. We know that that is a big portion, and there's a lot of work to do ahead there. Now, this slide shows our stakeholders. The biggest stakeholder of all, of course, is the community. We have our Ontario Human Rights Commission that will advise and guide the implementation of the recommendations, and this excludes the project management. The Police Services Board, the role is for project approval, allocate funding, ownership, OHRC recommendations to pertaining to our work being done, and also they're a project partner. And of course, Peel Police is the champion for this work and the final escalation point, the project issues, provide guidance and approval on the solution and what our next steps will be. And our police association their role will work on behalf of the membership to review and provide input towards the recommendations. Our Anti-Racism Advisory Committee will provide advice on the Human Rights Project on the implementation of the recommendations. Now, we're still trying to determine the independent governing body who will provide project oversight. The next slide, I am going to invite the chief to speak on the next slide pertaining to how we align the recommendations with our strategic objective. But before I do so, I just want to say that I want the community to understand that unlike many other councils where police becomes the chair and the lead, this will be a community-led initiative where we listen to what the community have to say and then move forward. So with that, Chief, I'll just invite you to speak on this slide.
Thank you, Joy. And what this slide captures is really at the systems level on the right side, but on the practical on the left side, how we will be informed by those who we serve, the academic experts, as well as our existing stakeholders, which Joy identified. And let me begin by the fact that the independent governing body is a discussion that we continue to explore. We know that there are a variety of different options, either localized, third party, or conceivably potentially provincially. So, but within that, the establishment of the anti-racism monitoring and accountability governing body is multifaceted in such that it has the previously identified stakeholders, as well as, just to jump down to the the lower level, is what upon my arrival here we had quite our traditional chiefs advisory committees, which have now not been, I don't want to say been deconstructed, but have been enhanced so that they're far more inclusive and also have representation in areas which we once didn't have, which are our chiefs resource councils, which represent 70 to 80 people in the community. But we also recognize the anti-racism advisory committee has a very specific role as it pertains to anti-Indigenous, anti-Black, anti-racialized, anti-immigrant populations, all of which we intend will inform, as you move to the right side of the slide, systems level activities. And, we've tried to, entrench them in the 7 principles with key elements that are going to drive it, which are in the multicolors. But as you can see, as you move around the outside, are key activities which represent service delivery right across the organization, right from our crisis response and mental health to make sure we are responding to communities that we have seen have been, as I've said, the failures of other systems, inclusive of mental health and health, have, had their intersecting points with us. But we also see, technology as a platform, our internal organization, a healthy workplace, right from data and analytics, and right down to leadership development. So as you can see, we want it to be informing all of our activities to strengthen our processes and systems to make us, more watertight as an organization as we move forward. So Joy, with that, thank you for letting me speak to that slide.
Thank you, Chief. Now I'm going to move to our final slide, and this final slide shows our timeline. We want to present to you our key activities. Today is very important to us because it's an opportunity to present to the board. We have planned community engagement sessions targeted for summer 2021. And I just want to make it clear that the chief and the deputies completely support this initiative to be a community base. We don't want this to be a police, initiative. And I know that there's probably a bit of consternation about the speed of which this project is moving, but we want to make sure that we get it right. And we do have our community consultations planned coming up. And the Chief Commissioner mentioned about our robust engagement, and that is definitely what we want to make sure that we do. We plan to release our communication plan with all parties involved, the Peel Police, OHRC, and the Peel Police Service Board, and that will be released as soon as the recommendations are finalized, because we want to make sure that there's a transparency and the community is involved. So this will be in the coming weeks, and we're taking our time, to get it right, because we want to be very thoughtful about our approach. But we know the key for this to be successful is to really have that robust engagement with the community. So as you can see on the slide here, we have the engagement sessions and survey for summer, and finalize the draft recommendations in the fall, and also to further community, have further community engagements on the recommendations. And for winter 2021-2022, we're going to basically rank the deliverables for implementation and establish our multi-year action plan and make sure that we have clear targets. And the same for winter 2021 and 2022, we're going to incorporate our final recommendations into a legally binding agreement and seek Peel Police, Police Services Board, and the OHRC's approval. And with that, that is the end of the slide deck. So I'm just going to stop sharing. And there we go.
Thank you, Joy. And through the chair, I just want to summate the presentation by saying over the last 8 to 10 months, the work that has gone into this point really is tremendous. And to capture it within a 10 or 12 slide deck and to ensure that we get all the salient points across in and of itself is a task. And I want to thank you, Joy, for doing that. I think that there is a tremendous amount of work ahead of us. We look forward to that. We know that there will be hurdles, there'll be tough times, but we will one day look back and know that change was needed. And as a service and as a community, we will be in a better position. So thank you to the board.
And Anthony, before we close off, I just want to provide the Chief Commissioner and Raj an opportunity just for some comments before we turn it back to Chair Attia.
Thank you. No additional comments. I hope my opening remarks were sufficient to convince you that the OHRC is committed to seeing this through to transformative change. Happy to entertain it if you have any questions in particular for the Ontario Human Rights Commission. I'll also invite Executive Director and Chief Legal Counsel Roger Deer if he'd like to say something.
Thank you. Nothing further from me. I'm open to any questions that you may have as well. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Are there any questions from board members? Mr. Howell.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. If I could just get some clarification on the data collection, the race-based data collection, what exactly that entails, and if it would include data collection on crimes committed by race and any use of force, how that would be correlated to crime. And secondly, if when we refer to endangered or specific race calculations, if we could also expand on that to include Asian groups. I know we have an emphasis on Black groups, but I think in light of some of the recent developments, it would be enlightenful if we could include Asian groups in that data collection.
Thank you for the question and through the chair. We are working with our partners, Dr. Lauren Foster and Dr. Les Jacobs, to actually set data collection standards, race-based data collection standards that currently do not exist. We are actually also working with the province of Ontario in conjunction with our project to be leaders, thought leaders in this area. So we're shaping that right now. And of course, the race-based data will include all race. And part of that is, yes, to define how that is collected and then how that is reported. And the biggest part of that isn't just reporting in terms of crime stats, but it's reporting in terms of interactions. And so we're defining those now. We're in the infancy stages with our experts to do that. And I'm certain by the next meeting, we can provide an update to that as well, sir.
Thank you.
Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you through you, Chair. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I think one of the real important points, not to escape, the important recommendations and where we're going, is that community engagement piece. I think that's going to be critical to the success and buy-in of this initiative. And I'm just curious on going back to the slide where it mentioned the anti-advisory. The Anti-Discriminatory Advisory Committee. Is that an internal board? Is that just the origins of that board, and who are the people who sit on it? Or are they representative?
Thank you, Mr. Medeiros. And Joy, I will turn that over to you. I also want to elaborate that, yes, as Joy mentioned, and she stressed, and we talked about several times and have been reminded by the OHRC, is that yes, the community engagement is really the success factor for this initiative. Also, member engagement is for our members here to understand, participate in the change that we are undertaking. And Joy, with that, I'll have you speak to the committee because I know that you have intimate and thoughtful conversations about that on a daily basis.
Thank you, Deputy. We have a anti-racism committee that was created just to be able to advise us on the recommendations once they're finalized. We have met with the committee just to go over our terms of reference. We're still in that initial stage, so we're not yet established as a committee where we've started the work. But we have met like a couple times. So this committee will be able to, once we're able to share with them the final recommendations, they will advise us on the recommendations.
Just through you, Chief, who are these members? How are they selected? Who are they? Are they just private citizens, members of, were they targeted for their leadership in this area, or?
It is based on people that are have experts in the area and also lived experience, and they are community members.
Okay, and it wasn't an application process. It was just people who were
invited. It was
invited.
not an application process.
Okay, yeah, and just getting back, so you know, really, you know, I think it's a great initiative. My concern, especially with you know, this initiative going forward, and you touched upon, is the success is really going to be critical to the community engagement. So people see themselves reflected in, you know, their comments and in the direction that it's not something that it's you know, coming from the institutional perspective where it's top down. It's really a grassroots, you know, impact on it, and all different groups. Because I do know, you know, I've already received some you know, inquiries and questions and so on, and it seems to always boil down to you know, certain groups wanting to feel engaged in this process, and everybody wants to. So the community engagement, and I think it shows courage on the part of this organization to really have these tough conversations and take, you know, where there's due criticism, and also turn that into sort of this positive initiative moving forward. So I just think that as an organization, we all have to have the courage to have these conversations. I think we're signaling that we are, and I look forward to some of those outcomes. And you know, this is not going to be, I think, as Anthony had mentioned, there might be some hiccups. This is not going to be a pretty initiative, but I think certainly there's a lot of room for really engaged discussion so that we can really scope this initiative in a way that's really going to meet the needs of the community. But with that said, this is great, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Crombie.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I was using the hand raise in the chat in the participant lists. So this is really groundbreaking, but not without its controversy, and many groups have expressed their concerns and frustrations. So it's important that we do our due diligence here. And I held a consultation last evening with my Black caucus, and we were doing engagements with the Black community, and this did come up. And I will share with you that there is some, you know, reticence and concern. And what was very evident yesterday as well is, you know, the issues of trust and accountability that really have to be restored. And you know, I know you talked about the monitoring that will be done. So maybe to you and to the chief and to or the deputies. So how will we use this really groundbreaking new agreement to increase the trust and accountability between the community and police?
Thank you, Mayor Crombie, through the chair. The recommendations in and of itself, when the draft recommendations, when released to the community, will be further informed by the community. From there, there'll be an implementation timeline and strategy in which the community and membership here at PRP will inform how that's happened. And there will be measurables, and Joy had mentioned that several times in her presentation about establishing the clear targets. And we know that once we establish the clear targets and key performance indicators, we're able then to determine some of the successes. From there, it will be an improvement in service delivery, and we hope reflective of the trust and transparency and feedback from our community. This is a multi-year action plan. It is not something that will occur on Saturday, May 29th. We will be at this for many years, and the trust and transparency, the accountability, and the effectiveness of our service will be measured over time. I hope that answers your question.
Anyone else want to weigh in? It's a really important question.
I'll jump in here. Sorry, Mr. Chada, go ahead.
No, thank you, Chair. Through you, I was pretty much asking the same question I had in my mind about the participants later on. And Councillor Medeiros asked the question at the same, but this is historic, and would like to be fully engaged and involved. And I want to thank all the parties here. It's a great job, and you know, especially the people who were involved from day one. And we're looking forward to seeing the progress in the future. Thank you.
And you know, if I may add, this is the unique circumstance we're in, and the OHRC and our team have discussed the model for this new vision of monitoring and accountability, especially when we have policies, procedures in place. Kate, you know, Anthony talked them as performance indicators, but we're really going to have all this data and information. Is how do you use it to make sure that you formatively can manage deviations and, you know, areas of need of focus, of risk, and that piece, you know, frankly doesn't exist, you know, outside of the paradigm. So this is what we're helping to do to inform it. But, you know, we envision, because we recognize, you know, the police oversight of themselves is not really what satisfies the desires of the accountability. Is finding this independent oversight paradigm is one which, you know, we are hoping to, you know, embark on. It's a discussion point, you know, not just for the commission and police leaders, but what does that look like provincially? What does that look like legislatively? You know, in the interim, what does that look like for the board? So, you know, not to prescribe that, Mayor Crombie, but, you know, this is the challenge upon us, is to find that, you know, appropriate mechanism and put it into place. So as vague as that sounds, that's the goal, is to discover that.
So if I may, a couple of points. The first one is this project is meant to do better or improve public trust and transparency as an outcome. And therefore, the project in itself, as it's being implemented, needs to ensure transparency so the public has trust in the project. And so I think, you know, maybe there are opportunities to do better in being more transparent, or at least be, you know, provide more information to the public, and something to take away. But just as an idea, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to create a website under Peel Police that is specifically about this human rights project, that talks about all the things that we've talked about today, and that continuously is updated with the progress. Maybe there's an opportunity to, with the approval or those who are comfortable, to share publicly who our committee is, you know, the project team, but also the community, the anti-racism committee is in its membership. So the public is aware of who is representing that, you know, that perspective for the community throughout the project. So the more that we can be transparent, I think specifically this project, I think the more success we will see coming out of it. The second point is, you know, while we've selected we've identified a group of individuals in the community leadership with, you know, based off different experiences and skill sets that are sitting on our anti-racism committee, we should maybe consider opportunities for wider engagement with the community, right? Throughout, you know, throughout the project, certain milestones where, whether through town halls or webinars, we can, you know, share the progress, share the drafted recommendations, or with the general public, and take that feedback throughout and incorporate it into the group thought, the group think that's happening, and coming to the final recommendations. And so I think we, you know, and this project specifically, because it's so groundbreaking, we should be, you know, we should demonstrate flexibility in how we're doing it, you know, and to ensure maximum success at the end of it. My final comment, and then you can respond to any of these, is the membership. It's not clear to me in the, you know, in the implementation you've presented, how we're engaging the membership, because that is an equally important stakeholder in this project. How we're, you know, I think you mentioned the PRPA is kind of the conduit to the membership, but maybe if you can give us further perspective on how we can, or how we are engaging the membership in general to seek their perspective, because the more they're engaged, I think the more embracement we will have of the project from internally from our membership. So I'll stop there. If there are any comments from the chief or the team.
Thank you, Chair. I'll let Joy speak to the membership engagement we have established thus far in terms of our communication and our internal communications via our intranet portal to provide information on the initiative. And Joy, I'll turn it over to you. I just want to speak a moment to the point of the existing Anti-Racism Advisory Council and to say that it's a starting point. There's no exclusivity to the group. It will grow. It may shrink. It will grow again. I think our plan is to make it as community inclusive as we can. And as a starting point, we have referenced leaders within our community to help us get this off the ground. But like any initiative, we will expand on the membership, the thoughtfulness of it, and make sure it is inclusive, to your point. Joy, can I just turn it over to you to just clarify that we are the conduit to our membership and how we have been communicating thus far?
Certainly, thank you, Deputy. Chair, we do have, we created an internal page for our members where we post all the work that we're doing. And any communication we have is on there for the members to view. And we do send emails as well regarding events that we're doing. So the plan is, in our communication plan, starts with our membership. We're going to engage our membership even before we go externally, because we want to make sure that our membership have a full understanding of what we're doing. In addition to that, I am actually presenting to different areas just to make sure that there's a full understanding of the work that we're doing. We started with our superintendents, and we're now engaging our staff sergeants and our sergeants in the different areas. And they're welcome to email the team with any questions they have at any point. We provided an email for the work for this project, so that at any time the members could communicate with us if they have any questions. So it is ongoing, and we will continue to do so. And each time we make some progress, it is on our SharePoint page, and the members are able to see the steps that we're taking. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Just to follow up, go ahead, Mayor Crombie.
No, please finish, please.
Another question, Inspector Edwards, your presentation talked about timeline. It demonstrated that, or showed that by end of this year, 2021, will be, the goal is to have a agreed upon set of recommendations with the OHRC informed by the community leadership. Does that mean after that, those recommendations then go to the Human Rights Tribunal for agreement, and then only then we begin to implement those recommendations? If so, what does that look like? When is the point where we'll begin to execute the recommendations agreed upon by the Human Rights Tribunal?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Before we can get to that, once the recommendations are finalized, then we need to socialize that. We need to make sure that our anti-racism committee, our chief advisory council, and the community at large gets the opportunity to advise on the recommendations. So we want to share that. We don't want to start the implementation process until our membership and the community gets an opportunity to take a look at that recommendations. So once we've done that and we've engaged them in our consultations, and then we feel comfortable that the community had their say, only then will we proceed to that next step.
Do you have a sense of that timeline, or?
We're aiming for fall for the recommendations to be finalized, and then we're looking at maybe winter 2021-22. But please know that because this project has so many different streams that at times or set timelines may shift a little bit because this is new for us. So we don't really know what's coming. So we may set certain timelines, but there is a possibility that the benchmarks might shift a little bit.
Fair enough. Mayor Crombie.
So thank you. A couple other things as we've been chatting. So the groups that are really disaffected here in Peel Region, and we know them by name, they're the Malton People's Movement and Advocacy Peel. And I know the deputies in chief know these groups very well, but they also have a huge mistrust of police. So how is the consultation going to be structured to put those voices that really have lost faith in the police at the forefront, so that we can focus on more distributive stakeholders, so distribute it more broadly. So that's the first question. And then the second question is, how do we widen the scope of engagement? It's really corollary, so that we can reach the grassroots. And so these are people now that are not part of formal organizations like those that I've already identified, the Malton People Movement and Advocacy Peel, so that they aren't a part of traditional groups or organizations. So number one, on widening the scope. And the second one is, how do we structure the consultation so that those voices, even in that are disaffected and really have a mistrust of police, are engaged and at the forefront.
Well, Mayor Crombie, I'll just say that the consultation will be open to the general public. So they'll have an opportunity, to engage with Peel Police. So it's not only going to be like select groups that we engage. This will be open to the community. So, and we realize that we have to find different ways to communicate, because not everyone will be on social media. Not everyone will be checking our website for information. So we realize that we have to try different platforms to make sure that when we communicate, that we're reaching everyone.
So some of the comments I heard yesterday, and those who participated did as well, is, oh yes, yet another consultation, yet another report that will sit on a desk or sit on a table, and there'll be, no action taken as a result. So, how do we appeal to those people who think it's, no point in participating because nothing will be done with it, and they've done this before and checked that box and still nothing has changed. So, there is not only an apathy, but there's a cynicism as well. And that's compounded by the mistrust. Thank you. Yes.
Mayor Crombie, I just want to, go back to one of my opening comments about, part of implementing change is an immediate acknowledgement that there will always be concern and investment from the community. There should be, if they want to be part of those that are informing an appropriate outcome. But we also acknowledge there are going to be, stalwart voices that will not be confident no matter what we do or say in terms of advancement from a constructive standpoint. So I guess my thing is, as it pertains to what do we do about, this is another check the box or it's not going to work. The other option is for us to do nothing, which those voices will continue to criticize us. I think the purpose of us is to really, listen intently, be informed by those we serve, acknowledge where there are opportunities, and with those that are, intent on an outcome that is favorable, I believe those are the voices that, are going to be the ones who will actualize and engage to their greatest. So, I think it's one which we came into this eyes wide open that no matter which turn we go, we are going to have voices that will perhaps question the authenticity or perhaps the likelihood of success. But, this is the bold aspect of change and venturing forward is we need to stay the course on these strategic activities.
Thank you, Chief. I just want to highlight that I know this because I'm on the committee, and I think Chief, you said it in the past. I understand that we're already making progress on actually implementing things that are clearly, things that we should do. I know that, for example, de-escalation training is already being implemented and integrated into our training program, and there are other examples. So it's not necessarily that we're going to be waiting till 2022 to reach an agreement. We're identifying where we can already making changes, and that's happening. Is that correct, Chief?
So many of the activities, let me first say, we wouldn't embark on this if we didn't feel like we wanted to commit to the outcomes. So if some of the outcomes are achievable in a quicker cadence, then we will do that. The perfect example is body-worn cameras have, already commenced. So, I think the project team recognizes there are still, amidst the ongoing human rights work we're doing, are things that are the right thing to do anyways, right? So, we're going to actualize on those as we go. And Anthony, I don't know if you want to clarify that more from a project perspective.
Thank you, Chief, through the chair. Yes, and some of the recommendations touch on initiatives that PRP had embarked on, in some cases many years ago, some cases recently. The point is that even in those cases, the initiatives will be further informed and continuous improvement through community engagement and stakeholder membership stakeholder agreements will enhance those initiatives that we have already embarked on. So it's not, again, that we have embarked and completed in relation to agreement recommendations. It's about things that we have done and that we will continue to improve on.
And just to top up, Chair Atia, things like training, enhanced training, augmenting our training, whether it be the growth of our crisis response teams, intimate partner violence with a lens to our racialized and underserviced communities that have access and connection to services. A lot of those programmings, are vital to community safety, regardless of the timing. So many of those activities will continue concurrently to advance.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any final comments from the board? Okay, I don't see any hands up.
Can Nick take his hand down? Unless he's got something to say. Sorry.
Councilor Medeiros, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just very quickly through you, Chair. I guess when there's been a lot of sort of some of the comments, and there is this focus of ensuring that community representation. And I know this board, we received a request for an anti-Black advisory committee, which is, I know, still being considered, and there's a report that's going to come back. But this type of process, that the process that we're embarking on, certainly for the request that had come forward, means that there are voices out there who feel that they're not having an opportunity to influence, or they need it. We need an anti-Black advisory committee. So they've identified a need. And do we think that this process might be a way to encompass and channel some of that discontentment or that need for that input? Is this going to be sort of a channel or a process in which we can encompass that, or is that still a standalone, and we're still, I know this is for the board for us to consider, but I just think that if you sort of look at the whole picture, and we know that there was a meeting yesterday that Mayor Crombie hosted, and we know a lot of these comments are out there, but there's an example of we had someone delegate, we had a request, we're considering that request, but again, it goes back to this sort of need and this focus on engaging with the community. Like, even for an example that we've put together here, a process, And sometimes, you know, just thinking back in my experience as a bureaucrat at the province, even before we designed this process, we could have maybe engaged with the public beforehand to help sort of scope and put something together to what we're considering today, because then people feel that they're in the ground sort of level, and this wasn't something that a framework was developed, and now, you know, we're going to them after the fact, and you know, we're just going to sort of tick off the box. So I know these are, you know, challenging discussions, and ultimately, as the chief said, is that you know, the intent, we all have you know, great intent, and unfortunately, sometimes I guess you know, the way that's being communicated. So I think that's a consideration that you know, maybe for us not to answer now, but with the request for the Anti-Black Advisory Committee going through this process, it just seems that there has to be this meaningful engagement, whatever it looks like and how it looks like. But I think a learning from this is that even this initiative from the beginning, maybe even before we presented something, there would have been an opportunity to go to people beforehand. And I understand that's sometimes difficult because you do want to already have something identified. I don't know, any comments? Maybe, you know, I'd like to hear maybe from Ms. Chada regarding when you develop these type of processes, you know, do you find that before, you know, you design something that it's, you know, as a best practice, good to sort of meet with community groups beforehand, before designing such a process?
Yes, thank you for inviting me to speak on this. Very much so, we need to ensure that our solutions are built on the lived experiences of our community. I know that it might seem like it's a vacuum for you because you're hearing from your constituents, as Mayor Crombie said, that there's reticence. What I would point out is that the OHRC has been in this, doing this work for decades now, and we're building on this large body of consultations, surveys, from our experience in the racial profiling inquiry that we have going on. And I think we had 1,500 respondents, community groups, individuals participate on that. So I've always said in that occasion that the discrimination doesn't stop at the Steeles border. You know, the issues permeate right across jurisdictions. In fact, this is a province-wide issue, and that's why there are elements, as Chief Duriapa says, that we have to look at the province-wide picture about standards. And so community voice is essential. And we are working with Chief Duriapa and his team to make sure it's as comprehensive and as expansive as possible. One tool may be, as you said, we know of other areas that are looking at anti-Black racism advisory groups, and that they have been successful ways of integrating the most disaffected and most impacted communities. As Mr. Howell pointed out, use of force is an extremely important issue. Black communities are the ones that are subject to a myriad of use of force that doesn't even get tracked. And so here is a time, you are on the cusp of tracking the victimization of Black and racialized communities on various levels of use of force. So I think you've covered a lot of important issues in your discussion, and I encourage you to continue to have that dialogue. Happy to answer those points. I do want to also echo something that Chair Atia pointed out about the culture needs to be captured, the culture of the organization through the input of membership. Membership is important too. Unless you can ensure that you're engendering a respectful, safe workplace culture, you won't be able to service the communities in the same vein.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And, you know, and just before we go to our motion, I want to thank the OHRC for coming to the table on this project with us. And I want to thank the leadership, Chief Nish and his team, for, you know, being proactive about this, acknowledging the issues. And I also want to recognize the courage of the membership on allowing us to embark this project and embrace this project. And hopefully, as the Chief talked about, it'll lead the way forward as a precedence and as an example for services across the country. Our board is committed to the members and the public, you know, to ensure that our police service continues to be the best service in our country. And so thank you to all of you. With that, I'd like to ask the board, who would like to, can someone please put forward, it'll be the mover body, Mayor Crombie, and a seconder, Mr. Medeiros. All in favor? Perfect. This has been carried. Very great presentation, Inspector Edwards. Thank you. With that, we will move to our next item. Situation table presentation will be given by Deputy Chief Mark Andrews, Community Policing Operations Command Constable Joy Brown. They'll be providing the board with a presentation on the multi-sector partnership between various community agencies in the region that meet on a weekly basis. Please, Deputy Chief Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Good morning, members of the board. I believe it was February of 2020, the Chief provided the board with an outline for a plan for the development of a Peel situation table. Through extensive consultation and collaboration with the community and community partners, this plan has reached fruition. Early this year, the Peel situation table was launched. Before I turn the platform over to our subject matter expert, Constable Joy Brown, who some of you may be familiar with from her work as the chair of the Peel Human Trafficking Service Providers Committee. Hope I got that right, Joy. I'd like to mention that up to and including last night at the City of Mississauga Black Community Engagement Session, we heard the community's desire to be consulted and included in co-designing and co-developing services. To paraphrase Nick, nothing for us without us. It is my belief that the methodology used for the development of the situation table is a great model that can be replicated for other challenges in our community. Constable Brown will now take you through the development and roll out of the Peel model. Joy?
Mark, and I hate to throw you for a loop. Do you mind if I, it's me, I can't resist talking this up. I want to highlight what Mark said before Joy Brown speaks. We're getting a lot of joy today in this board meeting. But I just want to take the board back to when we first met and we started talking about the shift to need to get upstream, take people off track. We've heard from the community about the failures of mental health addictions, especially when it meets emergency services at its doorstep. But it speaks to a variety of different areas which Joyce is going to speak about. And the idea is, how do we not be the keeper and holder of areas when it's a moment of crisis, when there have been opportunities to off-ramp that before. So I think it's an important presentation, because the establishment of situation table began in the early 2000s in Prince Albert. It was a model taken from Glasgow, Scotland, where we know that if we get people at the ground floor, at the grassroots level on a weekly basis, taking individuals who have a need, and we call it risk here in our terminology, but I'm just going to say it's a need that is repeatedly falling on the doorstep of either police, fire, and ambulance, when we are not the most appropriate person to stop it. And listen, if this is not sinking in, we've talked about people who have repeatedly called Peel Regional Police because they've been in mental health crisis, or their families called them in crisis. And, and sadly, the outcome may have been the loss of life. If we're not recognizing that this model of the situation table is another significant delivery to our community that's brought by community partners, take those people off ramp before it ends up in crisis, then I'm missing the boat in the pitch here. This is a significant activity here in Peel region, and at the individual level, we were confident we're going to see people taking off the path of crisis and being connected to the right services. So I want to acknowledge that Joy is the perfect person with skill sets to navigate multi-sector partners, and I want to thank her for the work. So Joy, over to you.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Deputy, as well. I want to thank the Police Services Board, the chair, for this opportunity to present to the Police Services Board. I'm just going to bring up my screen. I'm not sure if
Not yet,
you can
Joy.
bear with. Not yet. You can bear with me. Sorry about that. Seem to be having so much issues. For some reason, I'm not able to share my screen. I'm wondering if I've been given privileges to do that.
You're able to share it, just not on the right screen. The other option, Joy, is perhaps if you want to email it to one of us, maybe Deputy Milinovich or Deputy Andrews, and we can tab through the slide.
Thank you.
So while we're trying to sort through the technical piece here, a couple of things that I'd like to emphasize is that there's a significant connection between the region CSWB plan and the situation table, and that connection is critical. We want to ensure that the linkage is clear. A number of actions have been proposed to demonstrate the alignment between the CSWB plan and the situation table. These proposed activities include ensuring that the CSWB data monitoring and evaluation table receives the data produced by the situation table to inform planning and implementation activities. Real-time data from the situation table can support planning, identifying key risks, trends, and over time, challenges faced by the most vulnerable in our community. And I see that Joy has got the presentation up, so we can slide it back over to you, Joy.
Thank you, Deputy. So the appeal situation table actually started up, like the Deputy said, in January of this year. We did a lot of consultation with community groups in order to be able to determine who would be interested in actually participating. I'm happy to say that we have a number of different agencies that are involved in the actual table, and I'll get into that as I go along. The one thing about the table is that we have representation actually from not only Brampton and Mississauga, but also from Caledon. It's really nice to actually get all of the areas involved that are in the region of Peel and really take advantage of some of the supports and services that are available to people or residents of the region of Peel. So if we look at situation tables focus on identifying situations that are an acutely elevated risk, and we provide access to supports in order to mitigate that risk. And if we look at AER, so if we're looking at that acutely elevated risk, which is really the threshold of the table, it is any situation that's impinging on individuals, families, groups, or places with a high probability of victimization. If left unattended, these situations may require targeted enforcement and/or emergency response. The acute nature of these situations is an indicator that there are either threatening circumstances and they have accumulated to the point where a crisis is imminent, or new circumstances have contributed to severely increased threats of victimization. If we also look at the acutely elevated risk, we're really looking at the input from the people that are sitting around the table, or the agencies that are sitting around the table. They have the expertise and the professional experience when it comes to being able to tell us whether or not that does meet the threshold. When we look at the community safety and well-being model, we can see how situation tables actually fit in just perfectly. When we look at the situation table and the response time with respect to when a situation is actually presented to the table, what will happen is that intervention will actually take place within 48 hours. Our goal is to mitigate that risk, or mitigate the risk variables that are seen within that particular case, and then thereby reducing those identified risk factors, and then in the end, promoting and maintaining community safety and wellness. So if we look at the benefits of having a regional situation table, first of all, it is the establishment of a multi-agency, multi-sectoral collaboration with a focus on enhancing community safety. It focuses on elevated risk and the prevention of victimization and or committing a crime. Our regional response is a very good response in the sense that when we're talking about those complex high-risk situations, so we're really looking to improve the protective factors involved, and we're also looking at reduction of associated risk factors as well. One of the things about anyone who is looking to take part in services, a lot of the times, particularly the cases that are actually being presented at the table, they're in crisis. So to ask somebody to be able to navigate through the complex systems that we have here in the region is really not practical. And I think that there are a lot of agencies that will tell you out there that they're not always aware of everything that's available in our region as well. So we really want to assist those individuals and families in accessing those supports and services. We do have a variety of different tables that are actually here in the region of Peel. They're not situation tables. These tables usually have an age factor, in the sense that you have to be within this age and this age to be able to access those services, and sometimes it's a particular diagnosis. With the situation table, basically it's inclusive of all ages, and we have that individual can have a wide variety of different issues as well. So we're very inclusive when it comes to the table. And the nice thing about the table as well is it gives us the opportunity to create and collect data. So when we're creating and collecting data, what will happen is that particular data will actually go to the province. So the province has a risk tracking database that information gets entered into. They have access, the province has access then to look at some of the gaps that they may be seeing within our region, and maybe looking at ways that they can support our region as well, which is particularly important. So if we look at the Peel situation table, we have actually more than 47 members now. We meet actually weekly on a Wednesday at 10 o'clock. We started this on January 13th. The table itself is co-facilitated by myself as well as the representative CMHA. And we take referrals. So when cases are presented to the table, what will happen is those cases will either come from our community mobilization unit or they'll come from another service provider. Just an added note, our community mobilization have been trained in how to present cases, and they actually get cases or referrals from our membership. So it could be that they're getting a referral from our divisional mobilization units or our uniform officers, as well as our investigative bureaus. So they will take those, investigate a little bit more, or get the information that they need in order to present at the table. As far as community partners, we do have community partners that do present at the table, and really encourage them to present at the table as well. When we're actually presenting, that shows that there usually is a police intervention, or that it's basically has come to the point where it demanded an emergency response. We would like the agencies that are sitting at the table to be able to or be able to identify those situations prior to it getting to the emergency response. So we really encourage them to do that. Right now, about 90% of the cases that are actually brought forward to the table are from police. But we do notice that that our partners are really getting involved in being able to present those as well. So what we're seeing, and I'm just going to tell you, we have actually 39 cases to date that have been brought to the table. And when we look at those risk factors, mental health, housing, and these are the top 5. Mental health, housing, and so that is lack of permanent housing, addictions, antisocial behavior, and criminal assaults. So one of the things about mental health and addictions, it actually ties right into our CSWB. So it is one of the areas of focus within our community safety and well-being plan. I also want to mention this age group, youth. Youth between the ages of 12 and 24. We have 33% of the cases that have actually been presented involve youth between that age group, so 12 to 24. At one point in time, you know, because it is fluid, because we do meet every week. At one point in time, youth between the ages of 12 to 17, they represented 44% of the cases that we were seeing coming to the table. You can really see that, and what we're noticing is a lot of young people are really struggling, particularly with COVID and other mental health issues as well. So if we look at the overall process, I'm just going to go through it with you. Agency screening, what we do is we ask agencies to look internally to see if they have potential situations that could come to the table. Do they meet AER, or acutely elevated risk? Is it something that can be dealt with within your agency, or do you need other agencies to come around to provide that wraparound support? So once they've done this screening process, what will happen, and they determine that it is AER, they have the opportunity to bring this to the table and at our weekly meeting. And from there, we have all of our agencies that sit around that table and then determine if this particular case meets AER. If it does meet AER, then what will happen is we'll start putting together an intervention team. So the information that's actually disclosed at this point with all of our partners sitting around the table is de-identified information. So they determine the AER, and we pick a lead, and then we'll pick an assisting agencies as well, so that we can complete that wraparound support. Now, if a situation is deemed not to be AER, we still will provide those supports and services. It may not happen in the same time frame as it would if it was AER, but we do have those partners right there at the table that we can ask them if they can assist. So once it's been deemed AER, they'll move off into a huddle. And in that huddle, with the lead agency as well as the assisting agencies, they'll have identified information. So they'll have a discussion around the individual, look in their particular areas to see if they've come into contact with this individual as well. And then there is an intervention plan. So how do we do this? How do we approach this individual? Who is going to call? And then the rest of us will kind of join in. And then from there, once they've determined the actual plan, As I mentioned before, it's a 48-hour response. So within that 48 hours, we want some sort of contact with that individual or some sort of intervention with that individual or family. The problem right now is with COVID, it makes it a little bit difficult when we're talking about a door knock. There are agencies that have policies where they're not allowed to go out. So that intervention may take place virtually or with a phone call. There are agencies, however, that were able to go out and able to actually make that intervention. So it'll be a little bit easier going down the road once COVID has, the restrictions on COVID have lifted a little bit, so that we can actually make that physical connection in all the cases. So I must mention as well that this whole process is based on consent. So we need to have the consent of that individual to participate. And it only makes sense simply because, we can offer up those services, and if they're not willing to participate in them, then it makes it a little bit more difficult. So we do have a flow chart. The committee itself, and you can see all of our members there. As I mentioned before, there are 47 members. And we do report, the co-chairs actually report to the steering committee. And the steering committee is made up of Deputy Chief Andrews, as well as the commissioner from Region of Peel. We have another commissioner from the city of Mississauga, the Brampton Fire Chief. United Way, we have a vice president that sits at that table as well. And we also have a director from CMHA. So their goal or their job or their objective is to guide and develop the situation table, support the situation table process, and assist with the removal of systemic barriers. We meet as co-chairs, we meet with that steering committee anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, just to provide them updates and disclose some of the barriers that we're actually seeing in the process. So as mentioned before, mental health and addictions is an area of focus of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. And when we look at that age group that I mentioned, that 12 to 24, that's particularly significant simply because in the areas of focus for the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, not just the mental health and addictions component, there is an emphasis on responding to the needs of youth between the ages of 12 to 24. So if we look at some of the goals with respect to that particular table, the mental health and addictions table, is to improve access to mental health and addiction services and supports for youth, and making sure that we're really simplifying those pathways for the youth as well. And we did that by developing a situation table so that we're able to mitigate that risk. We're able to respond to the risk or the risk factors in a timely manner. And then also to the whole outcome or the hope is that we're able to mitigate that risk. The situation table demonstrates the commitment of partners to work together to tackle important social issues in our community in a more comprehensive and more collaborative way, which is a central component of our Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan as well. So we take a collective approach in order to improve safety and well-being for the residents of Peel. And that's all I have. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Joy. Not to sort of cover any questions here, but there are a couple of things that I wanted to sort of emphasize there. Joy spoke about data going to the province, which is important and which is happening. But earlier I made the comment about ensuring the connectivity between the situation table and the regional CSWB plan and the steering committee. The data also goes to the CSW data and monitoring and evaluation table, because that is a more nimble way of us reacting to environmental changes. That real-time data is much going to the CSWB table is much closer to the boots on the ground. And as the environment changes, we can shift and react more appropriately in a more nimble fashion than waiting for the province. The alignment with the CSWB plan is also highlighted by a quarterly report to the Mental Health and Addictions Action Table, which is presented by both co-chairs, I believe, Joy and her partner from CMHA. In addition, I also want to speak to the impact of the table in the sort of on the ground aspect. We have examples. Let me double back there. We have 90% of the cases being brought to the table by police, but in 100% of the cases, the lead on providing services is non-police. That's what the chief was talking about when he spoke about off-ramping people in crisis away from incident response mechanisms, police incident response mechanisms, as being the appropriate actor. And and I'm going to be very careful here because the confidentiality piece. I know Joy's listening to me carefully, but we have cases across the region where individuals have been for years been reacted to in an incident response mode by the police. In some cases, dozens, if not hundreds of times. And once these individuals were brought to the situation table, they have been off-ramped and have had zero or a significant reduction in police involvement since being supported by the situation table. That's impactful. That is impactful to our community, impactful to the individual, impactful to our community, impactful to the police service because resources are being used appropriately. We're early in the process, but it's evolving, and we anticipate that our partners will increase their percentage of cases that they bring to the table. But I believe we're on the right track to impact our community positively.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Thank you, Constable Brown. Are there any questions or comments from the board on this presentation? It's a very important one. Then I'll just have a quick question, Constable Brown. Approximately since you've launched the situation tables, how many individuals has Peel Police submitted to the situation table?
So we have, we're up to 39 cases, and Peel Police has submitted 29 out of the 39.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, with that, can I have someone move to accept the presentation? Mr. Bowden, seconded by Mr. Chada. All in favor? Thank you to everyone. That's been carried. We'll now move to new business. And I'm going to try to push us along because we're running out of time here. But the first agenda item, new business, in accordance with the board's procedures policy, we will now move to the consent motion for the consent agenda. The consent agenda deals with items considered routine. There are two numbers, item number 4, number 6. Does any board member want to remove any of these items from the consent motion? Okay, seeing none, then can I have a motion to approve items number 4 and number 6? And Mr. Bowden, seconded by Chair Yarika. Thank you very much. All in favor? Thank you. That's been carried. We'll now move on to item number 7, Peel Region Police's 2020 annual report. Chief, quick comment on the annual report. It's available to the public, and it's worth reviewing, by the public. But just a quick comment by you on it, and then we can put a motion.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair Tia. The annual report, as indicated, is a very lengthy document. Will be presented in electronic format. It is also one of the requirements of the adequacy standards and the regulations for the board and the service. Of course, we're looking forward to next year's annual report, which is going to affect some of the new themes that are in our new strategic plan. But as you can see, there's some really great highlights in the report. That are also accounted for in a variety of different summaries. So with that, Anthony, unless you have anything else, I'll kick it back to the chair.
Nothing further to add, Chief. Thank you.
Any comments on the annual report by the board, Mr.
Bowden? Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, I'm so happy that I get this in hard copy because I got to read it in its entirety last night, as opposed to running out of ink on my printer. The report is just top drawer. And Chief, everything about the report I thought was great, particularly on page on 29 of the report, showing the new hires and how many of them were female new hires and how many of them were racialized new hires, which I think we need to have those statistics available for all of us on the board, and to let the public know that we are being responsive to the community and diversifying the police force. The one question I would have on the developing of this report, are you doing it, Chief, internally with your staff, or do you use an external provider to put all this information together, because the report is absolutely outstanding?
Thanks, Mr. Bowden. We are thankful to have a great bench strength within the organization from our strategic planning and analytics department to get this data. This is a pretty fulsome process which collates all of it, so it's all sustained internally.
Thank you, Chief. Great report again. Fantastic.
Other comments? I mean, I feel this report really deserves for it to be presented fully at the board meeting, but it's so much information. I think this time we'll have to allow the public to download it and review it. But there's so much success in this report. Thank you, Chief, to your team for all of this last year's accomplishments. And like you said, very much looking forward to next year's report, because we have so much that we're doing this year. So with that, can I have someone who would like to move for this report? Mr. Bowden, and a seconder. Mayor Crombie. Thank you. All in favor? And so it's been carried. We then have our body-worn camera status report. Deputy Chief Edwardi, would you like to say something quickly about this?
Okay, the report has been filed. I think it's important to note that we have always linked a body-worn camera project with enhancing services to our community and making sure that we can enhance them in a meaningful way. I wanted to bring forward to the board information we received yesterday that was not able to be put on the report in front of you, and I will formally put it on the report for next meeting. But it was some information that we received that I reported on earlier through our partnership with the Ministry of the Solicitor General and our early adoption of a digital evidence management system correlating to our body-worn camera. We have now identified that we will be receiving some funding in relation to our project. That funding, which will be determined in the next couple of months, will be redirected to mental health and addictions crisis response from this project. And so you can see the linkages already from the body-worn camera project, the savings that we've had as first movers and early adopters, and to enhance across our organization response. So I wanted to point that out to you. The last thing I'll point out to the board just quickly is that we continue to remain on track, on schedule, and on budget. And in fact, with that news, probably a little bit under budget at this point. And pending any further questions, that's all I have.
Thank you. It's not often that these projects are under budget, so thank you for that update. Any comments from the board? Okay, can I have someone move this report? Mr. Chada, seconded by Mr. Howell. Thank you. All in favor? Okay, the report's been carried. We'll go to the final item, request for direct negotiation with Optiv Canada. Chief, would you like to make a quick comment on this?
Yes, Anthony, I think I'll have you elaborate on this, please.
Thank you. In fact, this report is, yes, a request for a direct negotiation, but it is more so really a request for an increase in purchasing authority. The vendor of record who works with public safety across Canada and is a vendor of record for both the federal, provincial governments and is recommended. We currently use as a vendor of record here for cybersecurity. And we know that the enhanced ability to protect not just police-related data, but community data as we move forward in this digital world will be very important. I want to point out that there is no exclusivity to this request. We will continue to use other vendors as well to provide cybersecurity services in this space. However, the synergies with different levels of government, with other policing agencies, really compel us to continue to use the services. So again, we're looking really for a purchasing authority increase, of course, a direct negotiation to do that. And we have the budget allotted already for these services.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Deputy Chief, is this software to protect our internal systems from cybersecurity attacks? Is that the idea here? Or?
Yes, in part, it is software to help us with that. It is also consulting to advise us on privacy impact, to advise us on identity risk management, and then to implement the best strategy we can moving forward. There are other solutions to provide in different areas to enhance this, and we continue to conduct business with those vendors as well.
And is this process, because I guess specialized software, is this process consistent with our procurement policy that we're negotiating with this vendor directly?
Yes, everything is within the policy. We brought it to the board because of the upset limit purchasing authority.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Okay, with that, would someone like to move this report? Mr. Chada, and seconded by, okay, Mayor Crombie, thank you. I'm having a hard time seeing everyone now. All in favor? Okay, then it's been carried. This concludes the public portion of the Peel Police Services Board. We'll move on to our in-camera. So for those who are part of that, can you please connect to the new link? Thank you.